So hello everyone. My name is. Hello.
Do you want to use?
No, I'm good. My name is Fabienne. I'm the center director here. I wanted to welcome you all, and I wanted to introduce Jacie and thank Jacie for being here and for giving this talk tonight. So Jacie Keeley was from Florida, was Lama Yeshe's personal secretary for 5 years. As a young woman, traveling, left everything, packed her bags and traveled with the Lamas and dedicated years of her life. And then 33 years later, then she was offered the opportunity by Lama Yeshe's reincarnation, Osel, whom you'll meet in about an hour or so, to be again secretary in this life. And so Jacie said, okay.
I said my commitment is lifetime to lifetime.
I know that's a hefty job description.
Looking for long-term employment.
Life to life. Anyway. And so Jacie has these unbelievable stories to share. And this particular story that she's going to share tonight, which I myself have not yet heard, but have heard that it's really worth listening to. So I'm glad you're all here. And so Jacie's offered to share it with us, also as a way to record some of the important, I think, elements and stories that are part of the FPMT family, so that we can have a historical record. So, thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And I have to thank Fabienne, because I suggested to her that there's this one particular, I have a lot of stories, as you can imagine, but this one particular story has never been recorded. When Big Love comes out, which should be soon, which is the biography of Lama Yeshe, this story will be mentioned, but the full story won't be told in Big Love. So I mentioned to Fabienne that I'd like to tell it if there were a group of people that would be interested to hear it, because Lama Osel, who will be here, he's the headliner, I'm just the opening act. Lama Osel loves old stories. And so I said, well, we could tell this story and record it so Osel could hear it. And also for Venerable Rabina Korten, perhaps many of you know Rabina. Rabina's asked me also, she said she's never heard this story. So I dedicate this evening to both Lama Osel and to Venerable Rabina. And the first thing I want to say, I think all of us Americans will like to greet you with a happy Thanksgiving. This is Thanksgiving in America, and my family's eating their big feast. My sister messaged me this morning. She's still making my favorite foods, even though I won't be there. So please enjoy from afar. Enjoy from afar. So there's 3 reasons. Is there anybody in this room who's like completely new? Nobody's completely new. So you've all got open minds about what you're going to hear? Okay. Okay. And you're okay. I mean, like you might not be okay, but you're kind of okay with this idea of reincarnation, and at least you've got an open mind about it, right? Okay. And nobody said no. So I'm going to continue on. There's 3 reasons why I think this story is really important. Number 1, what you're going to see with this story is that everything is so fragile. Anything can change at any moment, and we don't believe that. We get very comfortable that we've got this beautiful center here, which is a haven in the middle of London, and anything can change that would disrupt this beautiful pattern. So you can't take for granted anything that you have, any blessings that you have, and particularly when it comes to Dharma, you cannot take it for granted. And it's good to have these wake-up calls every so often to keep you tuned into reality that everything's impermanent. The second thing is to be aware of how powerful prayer is. sometimes we don't even remember how powerful prayer is, but the power of prayer is extremely strong, and it's important to remember that we can come together as a group and make things change through the power of sincere prayer. And then the third reason this story is so valuable in my mind is because it shows the unbelievable qualities of Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Have people in the room been able to meet Lama Zopa? Anybody had the fortune? Okay, if you haven't had the fortune, make sure that you meet Rinpoche. Rinpoche's, he's packaged in a different package than we're accustomed to. He's extremely devout. He's what we might call old school in terms of his, well, actually he's becoming more contemporary. His language is becoming more contemporary. He's really adapting to this 21st century. But he is a solid 100%, completely clean, clear Tibetan Buddhist Lama. He is a Buddha. But what he demonstrates to us in his earthly form is he demonstrates someone who is still practicing. And the story that I'm going to share with you today will show you Lama Zopa practicing to the nth degree. Unbelievable practice and unbelievable guru devotion. Is this okay? You happy? Okay. So now we have to think back to 1979. Was anybody born? And this room is a young room. Anybody born in 1979? Just a baby? Anybody else? Okay, you were born. Augusto, you weren't very old, but you were born. Okay, so 1979, I'm in the monastery in Nepal. Again, make sure you put it on your bucket list. If you haven't been to Kopan Monastery, you need to go. Honestly, go. If you can, do the November course. That's it. That's the key, is the November course. Your life will change. So I'm in 1979, sitting in the monastery in my little house. Cell phone? No. Internet? No. Telephone? No. Any form of communication? No. Okay, so there's the scene. I'm sitting in this monastery where I'm working and living. And Lama Zopa is scheduled to go on a tour of the West. And here's the date. Okay, here's the date, the ticket's bought, Lama Zopa's up at Laudo. Anybody been to Laudo? Okay, go to Laudo too. You've got to be hardy to go to Laudo, but now it's easier to get there than in the old days, in the last century. So yes, put that on your bucket list too, Laudo, go to Laudo. So Lama Zopa, who's in his last life, was a meditator up in the caves in the Laudo region, returned every summer, every spring to take care of his people up there, and his mother was up there, and that's where the Mount Everest Center for Buddhist Studies started, was in this Laudo area. So Rinpoche's up there. I've got the ticket for Rinpoche to go to Europe. Also, I know when Rinpoche's flying down from Laudo. Here we go. My job now is to go down to Kathmandu, go down to Bodha, walking, get a taxi, go to the airport, pick up Lama Zopa so that he can go on his world tour. Lama Zopa doesn't arrive. Okay, it's okay. I go back up. Take a taxi back to Bodha, walk back up to the monastery. Anybody know how far the walk is from Bodha to Kopan? How far?
About 14 minutes.
Well, how many? Yeah.
Oh, I don't know how many miles.
Yeah, a few miles. Okay, up. Yeah, and in those days it was rugged. So I get back up there, no problem. I go back down the next day to get Lama Zopa from the airport. Same thing, walk down to Bodha, catch a taxi, go to the airport, wait for Lama Zopa, and Lama Zopa doesn't come. Now I'm beginning to get a little bit of a concern because remember I have the ticket for Lama Zopa to go on this world tour and Rinpoche hasn't arrived. So now the next day comes, same thing, go back down to Bodha, get a taxi, go to the airport, still no Lama Zopa. So now I have a big concern because we're running out of time. What do? There's no one to consult because the person that I would normally report to wasn't available. Lama Yeshe wasn't available. And here's Lama Zopa not showing up. So I start to investigate my options. The only option is a helicopter. So I start to look into helicopters. And there are only 3 helicopters in all of Kathmandu, in all of Nepal, 3 helicopters. One is out of the country, one is out of commission, and one's being taken offline in a week because the monsoons are coming. So I have 1 helicopter, maybe I can get. And I honestly don't remember if the cost of renting it was $1,000 or $10,000, because it doesn't matter if it was 1 or 10, it was way more than I had available to me. So it was a big decision to rent a helicopter, right? So now I have to seek advice. So what I decide to do is to go see one of our Lamas, Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa's teachers, who's one of their important gurus, called Serkan Dorji Chung, His Holiness Serkan Dorji Chung, who lives in Swayambhu. You've been there? Yeah. So I take a taxi, and I drive up in the taxi to the top of Swayambhu. And by the way, this Serkan Dorji Chung is a recluse. He doesn't come out. You don't get to see him very often. You don't get to see him. He's just a recluse. So I take the taxi, and the taxi takes me up like this to the top. And the taxi parks, and there's a monk standing in front of where we parked. And I get out of the taxi, and I look, and it's His Holiness Serkan Dorji Chung. And he says to me, through a translator, "Why have you waited so long? I've been waiting for you." So this reclusive Lama said this to me. So now we go into his study, into his area. He sits and he does divination. You know, the Lamas do divination. He did divination, and he looked at me, and it was through a translator, but wasn't through a translator because I heard him completely clearly. He said, "If you do not get Lama Zopa now, you will never get Lama Zopa again." So that's big news, right? That if you don't go now to get Lama Zopa, you'll never get Lama Zopa again. So now I have to figure out how to get this helicopter. So I went around Kathmandu, and there was somebody who very kindly had the money to lend me. And so I rent the helicopter. And the helicopter is on a you-go basis, and you pay. You go, you pay, whether you hit your mark or not. So remember, monsoon's coming in, because the days have elapsed now. It's taken some days. Every day I'm going back to the airport. Lama Zopa is still not showing up. And I've rented this helicopter. Monsoon's coming in. I'm full of trepidation, and I made this promise. I said, if this doesn't work, I'm going back to America and waitressing for the rest of my life to pay this off, because it was a really big deal. So then what happened was this really, I had one of the Lamas at the monastery. Oh, so then I forgot to tell you. Every day I'm going to the post office, because we didn't have access to communication, but at the post office, you could get faxes. Faxes could come into you, and you could go to the general post office, GPO, and get faxes. So every day I'm going to see if there's some instructions coming from somebody on what I'm supposed to do, and nobody's ever telling me what to do. So I've gone through this whole thing of researching the helicopters, determining with the divination that I have to get a helicopter, borrowing the money to rent the helicopter, and paying the money to rent the helicopter. And then I go to the post office, and I finally get a message, and it says, if Lama Zopa doesn't want to come, then leave him there. But I'm committed now, right? I'm committed. And if we don't make our mark, then this money is lost. So now I turn to Lama Pasang. You know Lama Pasang? And Lama Pasang very kindly then went into the Kathmandu Valley and into the Bodha area and organized pujas at all of the monasteries in the valley. So we've got pujas going that were successful, and I don't have to go back to American waitress. And so then Kopan got puja going all night. I could hear it. I could actually hear all the pujas in the valley. That's how it was. I mean, the air was full of puja. And I was praying, of course, that there's no rain. So when I don't think I slept that night, but when I got up, it was raining. I had a lot of trepidation, trust me. So we get into this, Lama Pasang packs us all into this old Jeep. If people were at Kopan and remember the old Jeep, it was like this rickety old Jeep. All the boys packed in, Lama Pasang, we all packed in, I think a dog went or two. And we go down the road, down to Boda, off to the airport, and I see the helicopter, and I feel really, some excitement's beginning to arise in me because this is going to be happening. And I see the pilot, and he's this big, handsome Swiss pilot, and I really start to get some feeling that this is going to work. Then they come up to me, the people from the airport, and they said, now we need to see your trekking permit. I've never trekked a day in my life, never had any inclination to trek a day in my life. And I said, I have to have a trekking permit to take a helicopter up to Laudo? Yes, because you're going into the mountains, you have to have a trekking permit. So I pull my passport out and I flip through the pages, and there's my visa. And somebody had kindly gotten the visa for me. And what they'd gotten was a trekking permit that expired that day. It was like, the whole thing was like an unbelievable miracle. So now that hurdle is accomplished. I give them the trekking permit, the passport with the trekking permit. We're good. Now we get into the helicopter, and there were clouds. We were totally socked in with clouds. And we pull up like this, and we head off like this, and I thought it was something biblical because the clouds just opened, like the parting of the Red Sea, and we went through the mountains. Unfortunately, I was a little bit too nervous to even enjoy the view because it was really stupendous. And all of a sudden, we're landing after some time, and I said, we can't be there. What are we doing? And the pilot says, do you know where we're going? And I said, no. And he goes, well, we got to find somebody who knows where we're going. So we landed, I don't know, Chengposhe or someplace, I don't know. We land, and all of a sudden, sitting in the helicopter is this tour guide, this Sherpa tour guide, who could tell us where we're going. So we're starting all over again, up in the clouds part. We go through the mountains, and now we land. And I had never been to Laudo. You must go. I've never been. The helicopter lands, and Laudo's up there. I mean, the cave, Lama Zopa, and everybody's up there, and we're down here, and I'm wearing a chuba, and now I have to run up the mountain like this, and this nice Swiss pilot says, I'm leaving, hurry up, the clouds are coming. So I'm running as fast as I can to get up the mountain. These poor people up there had no idea what was happening. They looked down at a helicopter and this person running up the hill with a chuba and somebody yelling to hurry up. I get to the top of the mountain, and there's Lama Zopa. And Lama Zopa said, didn't you get my letter? And I go, my God, did I forget I got a letter? I can't remember. No, Rinpoche, I don't think I got a letter. And he said, well, I wrote a letter and said, I'm not coming down this year. I said, oh my God, I'm going to waitress for the rest of my life. So Rinpoche ran into his cave, and he had these meditation boxes. There were a bunch of them. And he was running back and forth in the cave, and I'm like all of a sudden realizing that I'm standing in the middle of this historic cave, and I'm doing prostrations madly, just madly, thinking, I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have done this, I'm so sorry, Rinpoche. Doing prostrations, and Rinpoche's running around, and he's doing mo, and I'm prostrating, and he's running. And finally he goes, I'm going with you. I said, no, Rinpoche, you don't have to go, I'm going to waitress, don't worry. Really, I thought I was going to be waitressing, but no, Rinpoche decided that he was coming down with me. So at that moment, all these Sherpas disappeared. And Rinpoche's packing, and he's packing up little boys that we could stuff into the helicopter. And all of a sudden the people are gone, and there's just Rinpoche and all these little boys. And now the helicopter pilot's still yelling, and we run down the hill, and all the Sherpas that had disappeared had gone to the bottom, down by the helicopter, and set up table and chairs and tea. So Rinpoche could have tea before he left. So Rinpoche has to sit down and drink his tea and be very sweet. Then we pile everybody into the helicopter, including small boys that could fit in various locations, and we take off. And I look out the back, and there's Rinpoche's mother holding on to the, I don't know if it's a rudder or it's some kind of glider, some kind of thing that's on a helicopter at the bottom. And Rinpoche was he just looked straight ahead the whole time, didn't look left or right the whole time. I was I was really sick to my stomach. And then we're heading back to Kopan, back to Kathmandu, and Rinpoche said, I did not want to come down. I made very strong prayers that I would not have to come back. But I could feel that the prayers of others were stronger than my prayers. So I have to come back. Amazing, right? For me, it was totally 100% amazing. And so we went back to Kathmandu, and Rinpoche took Rinpoche to a nice hotel, and Rinpoche got all cleaned up and went back to Kopan. They did a long life puja for Lama Zopa, and then Lama Zopa honored that ticket that we had for Holland, and he got on the plane and he did the tour. And then from Holland, he sent me a postcard of all the tulips of Holland, and he dedicated the merits of that tour to me because he said it was the best tour of the Western centers that he'd ever been on. So that just highlights the value of the prayer, how important prayer is, that we keep our teachers with us, because it's so easy to lose them. And then it shows Rinpoche, it shows the power of Rinpoche, because he was quite reluctant about being, and if you ever listen to Rinpoche speak, he says, I don't know how I got this title being guru, because it's not what I wanted, but it's what I ended up with. And so as a perfect disciple of Lama Yeshe, he listened to the prayers of the whole valley of Bodhanath and the Kopan, doing these prayers for Rinpoche to return. And he did. So it's an incredible example for us, for those of us who were on the Buddhist path and have some kind of faith in our teachers, to be able to listen to our hearts and to listen to that faith and to follow their instructions and to do even what takes us out of our comfort zone, because it's beneficial for all sentient beings. So just try to imagine a world without Lama Zopa. If you've been coming to Jamyang even 1 or 2 times, everything that you have here at Jamyang is because of Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa. So try to imagine a world without that. And for me, it's very dark. It's very dark. So that was a very quick story. Sorry, some of us missed it. Any questions? Yeah.
Jackie, can you remember what time of year in 79 it was, and how long Rinpoche did travel in the West? Into 1980, did he, or was that a second trip he did?
Yeah, well, there would have been a second trip. This was in the spring because monsoon was coming, so it would have been May or June.
And he didn't stay abroad for 2 years. He went away.
Yeah, came back.
Because he came to New Zealand in October 1980.
Yeah, that would have been right.
That was a very, very special occasion for New Zealand.
Yeah, yeah.
But if he hadn't have gone on the first trip, he may not have gone on the second trip.
Well, that's what Rinpoche said. And now that you know this story, your ears can be piqued when you hear Rinpoche talk. And he says that, that I've heard him say this many times, he doesn't know where this title guru came from. It wasn't what he asked for. But sometimes you have to do what the sentient beings need, even if it's not what you want to do, because it's helpful for others. And for me, that's the demonstration that Lama Zopa gives. Even now with a paralyzed body, he still travels. I mean, how many people in this room have traveled? And it's rigorous to travel. Traveling right now is like getting on a Moroccan bus. It's just not easy anymore. Whether it was ever easy, I don't know, but it's certainly not easy now. And Rinpoche does it and continues to travel and continues to benefit us. So these kinds of stories are very inspirational if you take them to heart. And maybe at your own time when you're feeling weak or feeling, you don't want to continue on. And you think about Rinpoche, who gave up everything. He was bound and determined to stay in Laudo that year. He wrote a letter. Oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you, that letter that Rinpoche wrote, it arrived at the airport as we were taking off. So all the things that happened during that time, one thing could have happened a different way, and the whole story would have turned out differently. If I'd gotten the fax before I'd paid for the helicopter, I might not have paid for the helicopter, saying, don't get Lama Zopa if Lama Zopa's not coming back. If the letter had arrived before we took off, I might have had second thoughts. If I hadn't had a trekking permit, that, for me, that's absolutely so bizarre that somebody, I don't even remember who got my visa, but somebody got me a trekking permit. So, and it expired that day, so I could go in the helicopter. If Lama Pasang hadn't commissioned all the pujas, who knows what would have happened. But sincerely, the air was palpable with prayers all night long that this would be a successful journey like that. So, Lama Zopa is an incredible example of guru devotion and working for the benefit of others, no matter what hardship it brings himself into. And how often, sometimes we can't get up because we're too tired, and Lama Zopa doesn't sleep. And this is my own personal experience. Lama Zopa doesn't sleep. And yet we sleep 8-9 hours and we have trouble getting up. But when you have incredible motivation like Lama Zopa, then everything changes. So that's inspiring, to hear these stories of the Lamas and their amazing, incredible determination to work for the balance, for the benefit of sentient beings, like that. So you have quite a break until 7 o'clock. Does anybody have any questions? I know it's an English crowd. Somebody.
Any more stories?
Yeah, lots of stories. What would you like to hear? Give me a clue.
Maybe something around Lama Yeshe.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So,
The old language.
of course. Yeah. So, I could tell you about how I met Lama. You want to hear that? I can just tell you some personal stories. So, I was looking for Lama Yeshe from the moment I was born. I have a very clear memory of that from the moment I was born. I was born as a cesarean section, so my birth wasn't as difficult as many, because I didn't have to go through the birth canal, which is, I understand, extremely painful. But I do remember being born, and I remember from the very minute being born, looking. And I remember growing up, wondering and hoping for teachings. And I remember at dinner, my mother had a poodle, a little poodle. And this little poodle was very vocal. It always was making noises. And at dinner one night, my mom said, I hope Nanette, the poodle, I hope in Nanette's next life, she gets a voice so she could talk. I got so excited because I thought I was finally going to get teachings on reincarnation. But that was as much as my mother said, because she didn't have anything to share with me. So I was very devoted to Christianity. I really, really loved going to church. I really, really loved God. And I don't want to be offensive to anybody, but it didn't work for me in the end of the day. When I was 8 years old and my dog got killed, and the answer was only God knows, it didn't satisfy me. I mean, I was ballistic. And so I continued to look, but really keep going. I kept going back to Christianity because that was the only thing I knew. And then as I got older, I started to look at other religions, but I kept coming back to God because it was the only thing I knew. And making prayers and just doing my own thing, trying to find the way to be able, because my wish since the time I was born was to be able to help people. And I really didn't want to hurt people. That was my number one wish. And I found that every time I opened my mouth, I said something that was ridiculous. So that was my real wish, was to learn how to really be of benefit and not to harm. So I went to college and I went to graduate school, and that didn't work, so I quit that and began what I call my 20 years of independent study, working in factories, working as a waitress, and doing all the itinerant jobs, trying to find out what life was all about. And I decided that the most important thing in life was self-sufficiency. Because if you lived in a big city and there was a bombing of some sorts, then everything would be over. So I headed to Idaho, and I don't know if people know where Idaho is in America, but it's a remote state in the north part of America, puts this cold to shame. And we were so remote that we had to park and then ski in. And when we brought our supplies, we brought them in on a sled. And if I couldn't grow it, we didn't eat it. I mean, I had a partner, and if we couldn't grow it, we didn't eat it. And if I couldn't make it, we didn't wear it. But it was my dream of self-sufficiency, but I was still me, and that was a problem. So I kept hoping and wishing that I would find these answers, because I just didn't know what else to do. So the Lamas, Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa, were in Indiana. So you have to have a little bit of geography here. So America's a big country, right? And everybody knows where LA is. I'm going to do it like you're looking at it. LA's over here on the west coast of America, on this side, right? Is that right? Over here. Okay. So the Lamas were in LA. And then they went to Indiana, which is in the middle of the country, right there. Okay. So some of the disciples of Lamas and Rinpoche these were the founders of Vajrapani Institute in California. Put that on your bucket list too. Go see Vajrapani. Fabienne was the director of Vajrapani. So you know how wonderful Vajrapani is. So the Lamas went from LA to Indiana. It's a pretty easy drive like this across the country. We have a really good road system. The lady in the group decided that before going back to LA after being in Indiana, they should go all the way up to Idaho to see an old friend of the woman in the party. So instead of making this nice route, they go all the way up to Idaho, where I'm living. And I had become friends with the friend that this lady was going to visit. So the friend up here in Idaho that I was now friends with she was a disciple of a Hindu master. I can't remember his name, but that hadn't worked with me, and she was cool that hadn't worked with me. But she thought that these people who weren't going straight back to LA, but were going up to Idaho to visit her, might have something I was interested in. And she said, "You've got to get here." So Rick, my boyfriend, and I went to see these people. It was Meredith and Dick and Chuck Thomas. And Chuck has no memory to this day of even going to Idaho, no memory. But it's what changed my life, because when they arrived, they had pictures of Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa and Jacie Rinpoche. If people met Jacie Rinpoche here? Okay, Jacie Rinpoche as a boy. And they told me the story about this boy being the reincarnated Lama teacher of Lama Zopa and Lama Yeshe. And that whole thing there was my teaching on reincarnation that I wanted from the poodle. And so this is in August, and we made a decision that in December we would go to the first time Geshe Sopa taught in America. Geshe Sopa, who is the teacher of Lama Zopa and Lama Yeshe, had been living in America since the 50s, but he'd never taught Dharma the whole time that he'd lived in Madison, Wisconsin. He'd been teaching at the university. So Lama Yeshe, out of Lama's kindness, and I feel like just for me, sent Geshe Sopa to teach at Santa Barbara. I met Meredith and Dick and Chuck, who had the pictures of the Lamas. Rick and I decided we're going to Santa Barbara to get these teachings. And on the way, we read, there were for people who are meeting the Dharma now, you have no idea what it was like back in that time. We had nothing available to us. There were very little books. You walk out here and you see all these free publications. None of that was available to us.
I'm just concerned that sometimes there's a few people in the audience that might not understand or know what Dharma is. So
Are there people that are new? Because I did ask that, and there was nobody who said they were completely new.
Okay, well I know someone that is, but anyway.
Who? Matt?
No, I'm old. It's something to do with skin.
That's Derma, and I think you're...
I invited specifically because I care about his well-being, and so I feel that Dharma is an important explanation to come away with.
Yes, okay.
Some explanation of that.
So in Buddhism, there's something called the Dharma Map. Do you want to know?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So the Dharma are the teachings. That's really what's so extremely precious, because, and perhaps you can make sure he has a Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archive book when he leaves. It's the teachings that open your mind and change your mind by seeing things the way we didn't normally think they existed, by opening the heart. And we didn't have any of these books that you see out in the lobby now that are so readily available, were not readily available when I started to do my investigation. And the only book that we found was a tome called The Jewel Ornament of Liberation. And it's a tome. I don't know if people have seen it or not, but it's a big, big book. And I was okay with it until we got to the Hell Realms. Sorry, Matt, you'll have to do a catch-up on that one. But we're reading this. We're nearly at Santa Barbara, and we're reading this because, remember, I'd been following other things, and I was 25, and by then I knew everything because I was 25. And we're reading this book. I'm reading it to Rick while we're driving, and we get to the Hell Realms, and I was shaking, and I put it on the dashboard. I said, I think we better go home. Because that was not what I was bargaining for at all. But we were, we went to this week retreat. I made a mistake. I thought I was a yogi and ascetic. I didn't bring a change of clothes. So I was there for a week without a change of clothes. Everybody needs a change of clothes because at least it lifts your spirits. I was there for a week. I hated every minute of it. The highlight of the week was Wednesday because I knew Saturday was coming really quickly. And sitting cross-legged, but the thing was, I had a very small mind, and I'd already determined what life was about because I'd been working so hard at this. And this challenged everything that I had already set up to be true. And sitting cross-legged, but the thing that amazed me the most was Geshe Zopa. Because we're squirming and wiggling and can't bear it. And he just sat so patiently, so calmly. His body was so relaxed. And every so often he'd look out at us and he'd go, I think we need a pee-pee break. And he just won me over because he had a level of compassion that exceeded anything I'd ever experienced before. It was totally palpable. So I went away for a year and had to analyze everything that I'd heard because I knew if what I had heard was true, I was going to have to make some changes in my life. And I didn't want to do that because I was 25 and I knew everything. So for 1 year, and I also made a commitment that I was going to meditate. I was going to take what I'd heard at this retreat, this 1 week retreat, and for 1 year, I made a commitment. I was going to meditate for 20 minutes a day for 365 days and see myself if it worked or not. Now, to be really honest, I have developed a theory that 2-minute meditations are the way to go. Because if you do 10 2-minute meditations a day, you get your 20 minutes. And you don't suffer for 18 of the 20 if you do it at one time. And like a friend of mine, the bathroom is a really good place to do it because you just close the door, 2 minutes, nobody knows what you're doing, 2 minutes, you're quiet, you can do that. 20 minutes, I couldn't do 20, but I did it. And it was like a graduation present. The 365th day, I ran into a really stressful situation, a situation where my voice would have been high pitch, my heart would have been palpitating, I would have been a little aggressive, and the only thing I did was breathe. I just handled a situation that I normally would have handled with some kind of aggression. I handled by breathing. And my inner cheerleader went nuts. Yay! This works. So the next time there was an opportunity for teachings, it was in Yucca Valley. It's a famous course in the history of the FPMT, Yucca Valley. It was 1 month, and wild horses couldn't have kept me from going, because I knew that I'd been looking for the pudding. I don't know if that makes sense, but every time that I would meet somebody, they were like the recipe. You know, I went to college. I really don't mean to be offensive to psychologists, but I went to school. I went to study psychology in college, and I found out everybody just had ideas. They had guesswork about where my goal, since the moment I could remember, was to find out where happiness came from. I came from a good family that provided me with everything, so I knew happiness wasn't in the things, but where was it? So I went to college, and it wasn't in psychology. That was just guesswork. Wasn't in, sorry again, for people who think differently, but it wasn't in the church, because the priests were great. I loved the priests, but they were guessing too. I was looking for the pudding. I was looking for somebody who embodied fully 100% from A to Z on where happiness came from. I was looking for the finished product. So I went to this course, Yucca Valley, and it was like over 200 people in this big room. It was just really, really amazing. All these young people, some of them are still in the FPMT. They're like really important names in the FPMT. And I was, could hardly wait to meet Lama Yeshe. And the funniest thing happened, I'm going to tell you this story. So we're all waiting for Lama, and the room, this is the first time Lama will have appeared, and the room was giant, and the lights were dimmed, but of course I had to go to the bathroom. So I ran out to the bathroom and came back in, and I didn't know what was happening. Anyway, I came through these big doors like this, and everybody thought I was Lama. So they all bent down to me like this, and I just made this wish, maybe one day. So anyway, I wait, and Lama walks in, and Lama wasn't well. Lama Yeshe wasn't well, as perhaps you've heard. He had a heart condition. So at this particular time, when Lama came in, Lama was looking very small. I say Mr. Magoo. Does anybody know who Mr. Magoo is? Do you have that cartoon here? Anyway, he looked like just a little guy, and I said, this is Lama Yeshe. Everybody's been talking about, but Lama came down, went around, got onto the throne, and then went into meditation. And I watched. He went into meditation. And for my eyes, Lama became the size of a mountain. He became unbelievably golden. That's from what I saw, was this incredible transformation from just a regular person who looked rather, small and kind of round, into this really amazing being whose every word brought magic to the ears of everybody in the room. There was just nobody who was left out. It was incredible. So, the hook was. We were taught the Tonglen meditation. People know Tonglen. And I thought, this sounds like a really great idea, doesn't it? Tonglen is where you take on the suffering of others and give them your happiness. And I thought this was the most brilliant meditation I'd ever heard of. So there was a fellow, I was sitting rather towards the front, and there was a fellow on the other side of the hall in the way far back, and he had a really bad cough. He had a cough that disrupted the whole room. And I said, I'm going to take on his cough. Of course, that's not, you don't really physically take on people's problems, but that's what I thought was a good idea to do. So I did, my whole meditation was involved with taking on Stormy's cough. So the next day, Stormy didn't have a cough, and I had a cough that disrupted the whole room. So I left the room because I thought I was really disturbing people, and I went outside and sat on the floor, and Lama Yeshe had his drink he offered it to me. He had somebody bring it outside and give me his drink. So that was the beginning of the hook from Lama Yeshe. So at that course, the land was given for Vajrapani Institute. So a bunch of us, after the course was over, wherever we'd been living, remember I'd been living in Idaho, so now Idaho's up here, and the course was actually way down here in Southern California. So Rick and I went back to Idaho, and we tidied up all of our affairs and then moved to this land in the Santa Cruz Mountains in California. And my time is up. So, I mean, if people still want to hear, you're welcome to stay, but I know you know we've got the headliner coming at 7 o'clock, and you might want to take a pee-pee break. So it's up to you. Do you want me to continue, or do you want to take a TP break? Huh? Okay, just a bit more, and then when you have to...
I'd love to know how you became Lama's secretary.
Okay, well, it's all leading up to that, you know.
That can be done in a quarter of an hour.
Sorry?
That can be done in 10 minutes or a quarter.
Yeah, well, I'll do the best I can. It was. I think it was my own personal journey. I know I'll be very frank what happened. So I was living at Vajrapani, and I got pregnant, and it was not expected. And by then, I knew what it meant to be a parent, and I knew that I wasn't prepared to be a parent. I knew that if I were to be a good mother, I should not have any hatred, ignorance, or greed, because that's what I would be teaching, is what I knew, and I didn't know not how to have hatred, ignorance, and greed. I was union oneness with hatred, ignorance, and greed. So I was really distressed that I was pregnant, because I thought that it was really unfortunate for this being. And so it was a very hard time for me. And this one lady who lived on the land came up to me and she said, I really don't know what I'm saying because I already have 2 children, but if it happens that when this child comes, if you feel you really can't take this child on, my husband and I will take the child. So I had a miscarriage and she got pregnant. And yeah, it became like a miracle story at Vajrapani. Because now I knew I was free, and that the most important thing in the whole world for me now was to be able to make Dharma my mind. There was nothing else for me at that point. So I went to this event in California, in Madison, Wisconsin with Geshe Zopa, and it was a really important event. There were all the highest lamas alive were there teaching, and I couldn't hear a word. I was sitting there, I wanted so much to hear what they were saying, and I couldn't understand what they were saying. Of course, they were speaking in Tibetan, but that's not why I couldn't understand them. I mean, the translators were there, but I still couldn't get it. So I looked around and I said, I'm just taking up a seat. Somebody has to cook Christmas dinner for everybody to be able to eat. So maybe I can help. Maybe there's something I can do. Because I knew the Dharma was it, the Dharma Map. Matt? Yeah, okay. I knew the Dharma was it. But I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could work. So I went and volunteered my time, and they were very happy to have my time. And then when the Lamas were getting ready to leave to Europe, I was invited on my own dime to join the tour party. So in my family, we did family photos every 4 years. From the very beginning, we're all in the same place, and every 4 years, we're all in the same place, but we're 4 years older. And in 2 weeks, we were to have the 4-year family photo. So I called my mother and I said, could you move it up a week? Because I'm leaving for Europe. And I called my boyfriend, who I'd been living with for 6 years, and I said, could you come get our car? Because I'm leaving for Europe. And everybody cooperated with me, and I left for Europe, and I ended up following the Lamas on the tour of Europe. And on my own dime, wherever they went, I went. However they traveled, I traveled. Wherever they stayed, I stayed. And by the time we got to Ibiza, I had enough money for a one-way ticket to India, or I could stay in Spain, and the director of the center said he'd help me get a job. So I was really tearful about this because I didn't know what the right thing was to do, and the only altar I had was a line drawing of Tara that I'd cut out of one of the programs, and I spent lots of time with this Tara, just really crying and asking for guidance on what was the best thing to do. And this fellow walked into the room and he said, "Oh, I keep forgetting to tell you. Lama says you should go to Kopan and he'll take care of you." So the first time I went to India, I flew with Lama Yeshe, and Lama Yeshe spent the whole time interrogating me, the whole time. And we got to India, and then we waited for Lama Zopa to arrive, and then Lama Zopa arrived, and Lama Yeshe went up to Dharamsala to make a report to His Holiness, and Lama Zopa took me to, I was supposed to be the attendant in all of these cases, but of course I'd never been to India, so it was like Lama was my attendant. And then I was supposed to take Lama Zopa up to Kopan, but I'd never been to Kopan. So, Lama Zopa escorted me to Kopan, and I ended up being at Kopan, and then one day I had to take Lama Yeshe to the airport. And I had never asked to be close to Lama Yeshe. I wanted to be, in fact, okay, I'll tell you just a few more minutes. I went to Lama in California when I knew Lama was the key. Lama taught at the University of California at Santa Cruz. Unbelievable experience. So this was a class, a regular prerequisite class for freshmen and sophomores. So these were 18 and 19-year-old kids in this classroom, and it was one of those amphitheater type classrooms where you enter up here and then you go down some steps, and in those days there was a wall of blackboards, and there were all these windows, and all the kids, they couldn't keep the kids away. They were hanging out the windows. The fire marshals gave up because the walkway, all the walkways were full of kids. They couldn't stop all these people for signing up for Lama's course. And Lama would walk in, and he'd go down the steps, and he'd go down to the base. He'd circle the desk. He'd stand on the chair and then sit on the desk like this. And then he would speak a regular classroom, just a regular prerequisite for a class at a college level. And I watched. I wore the darkest sunglasses I owned because I cried every minute of every class, because you could see that the words that came from Lama's mouth were like honey or like a salve hitting the wounds of everybody in that room, whatever their problem was. And I said, I made a vow right then and there. Whatever Lama Yeshe did to be Lama Yeshe, I would do, even if it meant standing on my head in a bucket of caca for 24 hours a day. I would do that because that's what I wanted to be when I grew up. I wanted to be so perfectly capable of not hurting people, not harming people, but helping them just by breathing. That's what Lama Yeshe did. Just by breathing, he helped people. So I ended up in Nepal, and one day they asked me to take Lama Yeshe to the airport. And I was nervous about doing that, just doing that. But then before Lama got on the plane, he wanted to have some tea, some nice English tea. And of course, I don't know the first thing about English tea, making, milk and the whole thing. So, I made the tea and I offered to Lama. And I said, Lama, if this tea is not satisfactory, then we just start all over again. And he looked me right in the eyes and he says, I like your attitude. So either it was a really good cup of tea or he really liked my attitude, because I got a letter from Delhi and Lama asked me to be his secretary. Does that help, Roy?
That sounds interesting.
Yeah. So, okay, well, I think you've got 20 minutes to the headliners, so thank you very much for your patience. Thank you. I really appreciate everybody coming and putting up with me. Thank you. And we'll see you. Yeah. So this was dedicated to Tenzin Osel Hita, who likes old stories, and to Rabina Kurtin, who is amazing. If you haven't put it on your bucket list, if you, yeah. Amazing. Rabina's amazing, and she's so helpful. Nobody has the energy, aside from our Lamas, energy like Rabina. And she'd asked me she wanted to hear the whole story about the helicopter, so it's there. Thanks to Kasia. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, okay. Yeah.